Hi, dear friends, and welcome back to the Nympho Life podcast. I'm your host, Polina, and today I'm joined by Arik Brückner, who is the co-founder and CEO of Choice. And Choice is the platform, the safest platform for booking paid companionship and intimacy services. Hello, Arik, and welcome.
Hi, Polina. Thanks for having me.
How's your day going so far, and where are you in the world right now?
It's just another foggy Sunday here in Zurich, and the day so far has been great. Yeah, I was really looking forward to having this chat with you.
Likewise, you are my first SexTech founder who I invited to the podcast. And just for the context for the listeners, we met with Arik via SexTech School, which is the online course we were a part of. And last time we also met at the SexTech Mixer in Berlin. So finally, we're doing this talk where I will be happy to hear about the platform choice that Arik has co-founded. My first question to Arik would be, how in general did you get into sex tech and what is your background? Because it's quite a specific and challenging industry, and you have a really great platform that you build. It looks super professional, I must say, very
Thank you very much.
like with great UI in mind. So I wonder, like in general, what is your background?
So my background is in tech. I've basically, well, tech and sales. So the business side of tech, basically. And previously, we've built a SaaS sales application for large corporations and built that over the course of 10 years, and then sold it. And I took some time off, and I really love tech. I mean, I'm passionate about technology. I really enjoy building technology or building technology products, and I just wanted to have an impact with technology. So for me, after the previous business, it wasn't enough anymore to just build technology for technology's sake. But I really wondered if there is an intersection of business and technology and building a for-profit business, but also having an impact. And then I researched societal challenges, and I came across loneliness as one of a big societal challenge. And loneliness has a bit of a negative association because when we hear loneliness, we automatically think about the chronic state of loneliness, like lonely people.
Yeah.
But the way I approached it in the research was in the broader sense of loneliness connected to also the state, the objective state, like aloneness. So somebody can not feel alone, but just be alone temporarily, like after a breakup or when traveling or,
Mhm.
different life situations. And then I thought, well, this seems to be a very big problem, like a societal issue. We are confronted with aloneness or loneliness. And it seems that whenever there's an issue, we turn to a service or a product to solve that issue. But when it comes to company, which is such a basic human need, like we are a social animal, right? I think stigma is preventing society or just humanity from using or accepting this kind of service like paid companionship. And
Mhm.
then so that's how I got into sex tech, because paid companionship is still very much connected to paid intimacy, and paid intimacy is very much connected to sex work, even
Mhm.
though those are very different categories. Like, of it, like we agree that having coffee together is not the same as being intimate together.
Mhm.
So, but when you pay for it as a service, it suddenly becomes the same, and it doesn't make sense. And we think, or I think that technology can help dismantle this kind of stigma, and at the same time make paid intimacy or sex work safer.
That's interesting. And so, do you define it in a way that, let's say, paid companionship is kind of the overall bucket, let's say, and paid intimacy is part of it, or those should be treated separately?
This was a natural process, actually, how we came to that terminology, or how we came to understand that terminology is really, really important, because
Mhm.
when we put up the first version of our website, it was choice, sex work, safe, inclusive, convenient, something like that. And then, the more we were pitching this idea or the platform of a safe platform for sex work, the more we were confronted with the stigma, because investors or even people on the street, like when you want to do market research, they would shy away from the word sex work. So we ran interviews around trying to define things, like the terms that are already out there. Like, try to define a sex worker. When is a sex worker a sex worker? Is it when you actually do sexual services for money? When you do it once, when you do it twice a month, a year, once in a lifetime? Like, it already, like, terms that appear to be obvious are not that obvious.
Yeah.
And then when you try to, then we tried to define sex work. So what is sex work? And when we asked about 700 sex workers, how much of your services or how many of your meetings are actually non-sexual? So or we asked both ways, like what percentage is sexual and what percentage is non-sexual. And when I say non-sexual, I mean it can include intimacy, but not sexual intimacy. So holding hands could be an intimate act, but it's not a sexual act. And the number was surprisingly high. It was 40% were, so the feedback was 40% of the meetings or interactions are non-sexual.
Wow.
So then we said, well, we don't have to fight all the stigma. We just have to fight the stigma that's there. If there's a portion of the market that we don't have to do anything, we just have to label it correctly, then maybe that's already easier to destigmatize. So 40% of the market is non-sexual. So why do we call it sex work? It doesn't help the destigmatization. So I think that's when we came up with terminology. So paid companionship is for us the umbrella term. So that is the highest level, so to say. And then paid intimacy is part of that, and paid sexual intimacy is part of that. And that, like, when we introduce that terminology, it also makes it easier to discuss or to explain, because the media, the press, investors, you're confronted more with curiosity. What is paid companionship? And then you can explain, as opposed to, oh, this is about sex work, then it goes into this bucket, and we already have an opinion about sex work. You either, think it's good or bad, and there's no discussion. So I think that's why we think terminology is really, really important. And we see it all the time, also when creating safe spaces, like just defining services, even if they're like, intimate services, like when does intimacy start and when does companionship end, and when does sexual intimacy start and when does it end? So it's quite tricky if you try to be exact, and in order to be safe, you have to be exact.
Yeah. I love it, especially that it, as you said, it reframes it in people's minds, because then sex work could be very one-directional what people associate with it, and all of a sudden it just opens new possibilities even for people to think of that and consider it for themselves, how they can benefit from it. What would you say are other services that could be, so we mentioned the sexual intimacy, non-sexual, where it's maybe just spending time speaking with each other. There is the concept of escort, which is, I know it basically being like a companion to the person, maybe accompanying to a dinner or travel together. Is there something else that maybe as a surface fall under this category that was maybe surprising for you, that people are seeking to find in order to deal with loneliness as well?
Yeah,
Address it.
And by the way, I think so I agree, about escorting. It's just that when you say escort, and for you it's accompanying someone for dinner, for a lot of people, escort, the term itself, is also connected to sexual intimacy. even though
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be. But I think that's exactly the problem. People hear words and terms that they read in the news or somewhere, and then they automatically have an image, or they have a story, or they have a definition for it without challenging that definition over time. Like, those terms may have been defined, I don't know, 40, 60, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And we still use them, but they are complete, like the definition of the term is completely outdated because society has moved on, has evolved, you know, has opened up in a lot of ways. Um, so so interesting or surprising in terms of services was how so the way we built the platform is to be the safest platform on the planet. So there's a lot of verification requirements like ID scanning, selfie taking. There's like a strike system that if you go
Mm-hmm.
against the behavioral guidelines, you get a strike on your profile, and that's visible for everyone that wants to chat with you. So what happened is all of this attracts a certain kind of clients, basically the clients who see the benefit of the system for everyone and then decide to use it with all the conditions. And the most interesting category, so one of our top two categories is actually education.
Hmm.
So it's people who book a coffee meeting or a lunch or a dinner with somebody who also provides intimate or paid sexual intimacy. So people who would say they are sex workers, but not for an intimate service, but for asking questions. So the exchange of know-how, basically expert know-how. And I think that's a very neglected kind of service out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever there's an issue, we turn to experts. Like you would have a lawyer draw up a contract. You would have to, I don't know, you go to a professor for a certain, or a doctor, when you have a health issue, or a professor in university of a specific area that you want to know. But when it's about, I feel that when it's about intimacy, we oftentimes turn to very theoretical know-how as opposed to
Or porn.
or poor. Yeah, okay, that's the word. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
but it's still
unfortunately
not
the worst.
real life experience. Yeah, but it's still, as you said, it's a problem for that it's not realistic at times.
Yeah, exactly, and that creates unrealistic expectations. So I mean, I think that's another issue or challenge is when you turn to adult entertainment for education. We don't differentiate between entertainment and real life. So when
Yes.
and it's astonishing, right? Because with action movies, we have no problem distinguishing that. It's obvious that if somebody jumps from a building and lands on another building, that in real life will never happen. It's not possible. But when we look at adult entertainment, oftentimes one or both parties feel that this is normal and this, should be redone without actually realizing that this is entertainment, and you may like this in real life, but you also may not like this in real life. Like there's a distinction, a separation that has to be made. So yeah, I think education was a very surprising a very surprising kind of service spectrum that we didn't promote specifically, but just happened to become one of the most regular ones that are booked on the platform.
I love it. And can you give like more specific examples that you heard from the service provider? So I imagine the most common probably would be how to please your partner, or I don't know, like how to squirting is always like the topic that people are really curious about. It's kind of looks a certain way also in porn, which is also not necessarily realistic. But then the mechanic of it, I imagine you need someone to explain it to you or maybe show how you should move to achieve this. And I think this would be a super relevant question for or to book a session with a professional who could actually explain it to you or show it on your partner or help you give it to your partner or to yourself, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think that's where we hopefully will get to eventually.
Mhm.
That more and more people realize that sex workers can practically counsel. So it doesn't have to be paid intimacy or paid sexual intimacy for the sake of fulfilling a need, but actually for transferring know-how, practical
Yeah.
know-how. When you want to become a 100-meter sprinter, you don't get
A
they don't
coach.
give you a book, like that doesn't make sense. Like it's obvious that if you want to become very fast at running, that you have to run a lot, and you
Yes.
go and run with a coach and an expert that is an expert in running. And yes, maybe you read a book about nutrition and other things that will help you get better at running, but eventually it's a practical thing. And I think with intimacy, it seems obvious that it's a practical thing, but oftentimes we turn to the internet, we read articles, but in the end of the day, it's a practical problem. It'll be more effective or more efficient if you also get practical consultation. It's just that, again, stigma is preventing, I guess, stigma, but also I think, or we believe a big part of it is also the booking process currently that
Mhm.
is preventing society from having better access to paid intimacy providers or sex workers for other kinds of services than what people think are the normal or the more frequent or the average services. So that's what we hope to get to. But for now, the education or the educational services that are being requested are mostly around kink and BDSM.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Interesting.
they ask around they ask for an introduction into this world, into the BDSM world. Like they ask, what kind of services are there, what do studios look like, how does a session go, how would a first session look like as opposed to a session maybe in 1 year or 2 years, when they became more of an expert. So it's right now focused on the BDSM world, but that's also the reason why we have, for example, somatic sexologists on our platform, and we actually check the
Mhm.
certificate. So if somebody says they offer that's why we have two kinds of services. We have intimacy workshop certified and
Mhm.
intimacy workshop not certified. But all the providers that put the certified service actually showed us the certificate, and we checked the certificate.
Mhm.
So it's really important to us that there's this very transparent communication of, what is being offered and what can be requested and what is to be expected.
That's cool. So I imagine that you also have then dominatrixes for hire on your platform, sexologist, escort, and I guess also some people who can just offer, let's say, just companionship.
There's also the other, and this was one of the objectives, was actually to destigmatize by normalizing. So now we have people on the platform who also just offer companionship. So no intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
not even holding hands, just companionship. Like they would be open to have dinner or to have a video chat session or a text or do text messaging, but they wouldn't do anything beyond that. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because then when we had applications like that, I asked a couple of those providers for video interviews, and I asked, what made you not shy away to sign up on a platform where there is an intimate section and there are people also offering paid intimacy or paid sexual intimacy? And they said they didn't have a problem at all with that because that's a different section, and they understood that
Mm.
on this platform everybody can define their own boundaries, and there's a very broad spectrum of paid companionship, and they appreciated that and found that a good way. And it's also interesting that some of those providers were very successful. So
Mm-hmm.
there were people who signed up, and they within 12 hours made almost around 950 Swiss francs in just text chatting. So we don't see the chat, we just see the nature of the chat. So whether it is a text message or whether it is media being exchanged or image files or video files.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a pure text chat-based exchange for, to just generate additional income
Mm-hmm.
for someone
Okay.
who wouldn't want to sign up for OnlyFans because that was too intimate for them. They
I
were
see.
fine giving or providing companionship, but in a chat-based way.
That's cool. I haven't thought of it that it's also an option to just not necessarily having an in-person meeting. So there's also an option to just exchange, I don't know, if you live in different countries, for example, to just have an interaction via text or media. That's interesting. I want to ask you also about, again, something that surprised you, but on the other side of the spectrum, in terms of the audience. Because,
Mm-hmm.
of course, stereotypically, if we talk about the services of paid intimacy, I guess the most stereotypical thought of is of a middle-aged cisgender male, maybe in relationships or not in relationships at the moment of like getting this service. But I imagine that this is again not very like reflective. It's not everyone who uses the services of paid companionship or intimacy. What are some of the like audience or people that surprised you who use your platform or in general this kind of services?
So more than 1.5 years in to building this platform, I still cannot find anything typical. Like that. So that's a natural thing to do, right? We think in stereotypes because that is,
Yes.
I don't know how they get created, but the assumption is that they get created by movies or documentaries or the media in general, and that's why we have stereotypes. That's why when we hear sex work, we automatically think about a female provider and a male
Mm-hmm.
customer.
Yes.
And it's just because we've seen this, or when we hear the word, for example, prostitution, we don't think about the distinguishment or the distinguishing between sex work and prostitution. We think it's the same, but there's a reason why sex work as a term was introduced, because sex work refers to the self-determined way or type of work of paid sexual intimacy. And it's very different from the term prostitution. But in a lot of movies or in a lot of news articles, prostitution is used interchangeably with sex work, which is wrong, very wrong. It's something very different, and it's very important in the discussion. So I think what we're trying to achieve here is, and this was difficult to research, but what we're trying to achieve is an inclusive platform, inclusive in also from the client side. So when we ran a survey with potential male customers, and we asked, what is your number one priority, or what is your number one concern using a platform like this? And it was very clear that the number one concern was profile verification. So the
Okay.
person that you're chatting with or interacting with being the same person that actually shows up to the meeting, or this being the same person that is in the profile. So profile verification or profile accuracy is the number one concern in our survey. And then we did the same survey, an anonymous survey on social media among potential female customers. And it was again very clear that the number one priority is safety. So the number one priority is, okay, if I chat with someone and then we decide to meet, and maybe we decide to meet for intimacy, then the number one priority is this provider going to be safe for me?
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense. And now it also makes sense why that part of the market, the female customer market, is currently way smaller, because there is no platform that provides safety. So the only way this market operates currently is through word of mouth recommendations. So we talked to a lot of male providers on our platform, but also off our platform, and to understand the market of female customers better. And right now, the only thing that guarantees this kind of, well, guarantee is the wrong word, but the only thing that comes close to something safe is a reference. So a female customer referring a male provider to another potential, female customer, saying, I had a good experience with this person and this person is safe, which is not a guarantee, but that's how it currently works. Like we had an interesting anecdote is there was a male provider that used to be the boyfriend at a corporate Christmas dinner or holiday dinner every year of another female executive. So same company, same Christmas dinner or same Christmas event, but every year he was the companion of
Yeah,
another very senior female executive.
that's fun.
So so I think that's interesting. And then another service that is being booked or requested a lot among male companions is wing person. So basically, an individual woman or a group of women who want to go out and have fun, and then but don't want to dictate whom they talk to or whom they don't talk to. And
Yeah.
then they would request the services of a male companion to just go there with them and basically watch out for their drinks, and so nobody puts
Wow.
anything into their drinks, and just make sure that if they don't want that anybody talks to them, that nobody talks to them, and if they want to, like super normal
Yes.
stuff, that more but again, more around safety. Like it's more like what we would think as bodyguard or security staff kind of work.
Yeah.
And and but but we would right now it's quite difficult to book these kind of services, because I mean, where would you go, right?
Yeah.
Right now there's only online ads of male companions, but you have to send an email. You don't know if that person is real. That's again the booking process that we think is problematic, especially when it comes to safety. So that's what we're trying to change.
This is a super interesting use case. I would never think of that, but it totally makes sense. And another target audience, I imagine, as far as I've read and researched, also people with disabilities, right? Who definitely are, some, not all of them, but some of them, in need of intimate connection, because like all of us humans. Have you also encountered the use cases on your platform of people with disabilities?
So not yet, but it's something that is offered on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So providers can specify whom they want to provide services to. And when they select people with disabilities, then we ask if they have previous experience with that. And if they're,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a certification that they may have, or an education or training specifically to people with disabilities. I think what's important is that, so in researching like the requests or the services that people with disabilities make, I think it's important to understand. I mean, there's different levels of disabilities, but it's
Mm-hmm.
important to understand the process that may or may not be connected to the entire, rendering of the service. So, for example, one person that we talked to is a person in a wheelchair. They are in a disability home. So
Mm-hmm.
when they when they want to request the service, and actually the institution, so the home where they live, pays 4 times a year for paid sexual intimacy. So
Wow.
they actually pay for it. But
Where is
the
that? Which country?
so that's in Switzerland. That's
Mm-hmm.
in Zurich actually. And but when they go through the booking process, it's an entire coordination of the entire home, because there's a different process for that. They use different kind of soap for the hygiene. They use, it's like a special occasion.
Yeah.
They would put on different clothing, but the entire home knows that this patient or this person will have paid intimacy today, and then it's an entire preparation process. There's a different room for that. They need to, prepare in a different way. Like it's an hours long, multiple hours long preparation process. So there's also a certain accountability on the provider side, to either be trained or be experienced in dealing with a sensitive, situation like that. Because when they are, suddenly or without like notice, are late or change their mind about rendering the service, etc., it can be, it can be extremely like disturbing or a sad event for,
Of course.
for the entire, or like a shameful event for that person, like for the client person, because they've gone through all this preparation, and then it's not happening.
Yeah.
The frustration that happens is extreme. And obviously consent can always be withdrawn. It's not about that. It's just about making
It's
sure.
emotional moment, right?
Yeah,
And
I think
expectations.
it's about understanding that, and I'm not saying this is with all the people that have a disability, but I think there are just cases where we need to be aware of the actual, the actual process that is connected to that. And if as a platform, by checking certification or checking experience levels, we can avoid these frustrated experiences, or just prevent them, not all the time, but some of the time, then I think that adds value as well.
Yeah. Wow, but I'm so impressed that, not surprised that Switzerland is so progressive, but I really impressed by the recognition of the need and actually dedicating the budget, because I guess it's like a state level, right? Or like
No,
healthcare
so
kind of level.
so the example I mentioned is not on a state level. That's on an individual. So it's a foundation
Uh-huh,
that
okay.
manages this home that has only about 30 patients, or 30 people who live there,
Okay, so foundation.
with a very particular disease. But it's a private institution.
Yeah, but still,
Yes.
it's so progressive to actually be recognizing the need and helping out with that and helping to arrange it. And speaking of, in general, verification process, can you tell me how does the onboarding process look like for the user side and for the service provider side? And how do you enforce, in general, safety protocols when it comes to a meeting, like in-person meeting, for example? Do the profiles have to have some sort of rating besides this general verification process? Um, yeah, especially for both sides. Like, how
Yeah,
do you?
there's so much functionality that we can and are still implementing and building. I mean, it's endless. And that's, I think, part of the reason why we're building this platform, is because we just think we are not building a safe platform. Like, meeting strangers is never safe. It's never absolutely safe. It will never be absolutely safe. But right now, if we look at what's out there, we are just so far away from the safest way possible through technology, that we are just building each day, each week, each month. We're building more functionality to get us closer to the safest way possible. And so right now, how it works is, clients, if they want to chat, they just have to verify the phone number. So phone numbers are never exchanged. And there's, again, a reason for that. It's not because we want to tie people to our platform, which seems to be the default assumption. It's actually because if you exchange numbers, we cannot block anyone anymore, right? As soon as you exchange a number on WhatsApp, another person can just, if you block that person, they can just change the phone number and start writing you from a new number. There is no definite way of blocking the connection. As opposed to when the chat is on our platform, and, let's say somebody is starting to boundary push, which happened on the platform. So the client side starts to renegotiate things like, if I pay extra, would you do X, Y, Z? And like, through our strike system, now it's possible that the provider side can just flag that conversation, say this is against the choice code, which is our behavioral guidelines, then submit the screenshot, say what was against the guideline. And then if it's approved, then a strike goes on the profile of the other user or the client in that example. And then when they start a new chat with another provider, that provider will see, oh, there was a previous report against the behavioral guidelines. So, it's just a flag. They'll be extra careful. And if it happens again, then we can block an account for a certain amount of time, or we can block them indefinitely. And that's for remote interaction. What we are implementing now is age estimation for chat. There's a difference between, so if you want to meet in person on choice, everybody has to scan a government issued ID, a driver's license, an ID, a passport, and take a selfie. And we use a banking grade system that checks the authenticity of the document and whether it matches the selfie. So it's not somebody looking at the passport saying, oh yeah, I think this is a real passport, and oh yeah, this selfie looks about the same. It's a banking grade system that does about 50 to 60 checks on the document, like whether the number is correct, whether it actually matches with, the year that the document was issued. Did they actually look in that year that way from that country, etc. So there's a lot of checks that are being done. So for in-person meetings, you anyway have to go through that. For chat, we are now adding age estimation because people, and it's always a balance between creating safety and safety features and restricting providers, to generate income. So we don't want to, create barriers where they're not necessary. But for example, when it comes to remote interaction, there's technology where there's no data transmitted. The model is actually downloaded to your browser in the back. It happens in the browser. It just scans your face, and with the face scan, it's not stored anywhere. Your age is estimated. So it can, and it's being used for tobacco products right now, selling tobacco products. So it's completely anonymous. No identity is revealed or anything, but you can actually make sure that people who are underage don't have access, even without scanning an ID. And then, but obviously it's not 100% accurate. So you have to set the level, not for example, to 18 years, you set the level for 25, and then potentially somebody who is 22 or 21 would still go through, would still be classified as underage. But that's when they can opt in and say, I prove that I'm of age by scanning an ID. But it's, it's detailed technical things like that can be done and just aren't done right now because I don't know why. I mean, because it's just more effort. It's actually complicated.
Yeah.
It's way more complicated than building a directory, like the way paid intimacy or sex work is booked right now is through directories or agencies.
Or Telegram.
Yeah.
It's a big case also. It's even less safe or less
it's like there's no
accountability.
regulation at all. So, and then after the meetings, we ask also if the behavioral guidelines were met. So that's like the minimum. Was everything according to the guidelines? And then the second question is, would you want to repeat this experience?
Okay.
So sometimes, sometimes a provider or a client would say, nothing was wrong. Like there was nothing against the guidelines, but I just don't want to meet this person again. Like there's no chemistry I don't enjoy, providing services to that person.
Yeah.
And that's legitimate.
Fair enough.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
All right. And let me ask you, how do you acquire users from like customer side and also service provider side? Because clearly advertising is very tricky in our field. Tell me how you do it. Is it word of mouth or it's you use some other tools besides PR, of course, and public appearances that you do quite often? What are some other strategies that you employ?
Yeah, so one of the benefits is that paid companionship is legal everywhere. So that's not problematic to advertise paid companionship in general. That's one. And then the other thing is through the providers. So we actually talk to and collaborate with providers And then what we do is we say, or we collaborate closely and say, as a sponsorship or as an incentive, we covered advertising fees on existing platforms, and then in return, they would create a profile with us and use Choice
Oh,
as the booking
I see.
tool. And through that, we believe we can create a dynamic from inside the market where, providers just need to set the rules. I mean, it's interesting in Europe where in some countries, like Germany or Switzerland, the laws are more progressive. It's actually less safe. So in
Mm,
in Europe, it's not quite normal for clients to scan ID to request an intimate service, as opposed to the US where screening and client screening is completely like it's in most cases it's normal, it's standardized.
yeah.
There's even stricter screening in an illegal market. It doesn't make any sense. So I think what we're trying to do is just um, supporting providers who want to set those rules or boundaries doing so. But it's something that needs to be introduced from the provider side.
Yeah. And also very much admire the part of research that you seem to do really a big chunk of research before you, or like even during the process of building it. How open were the service providers to answer your questions just so you can implement these insights into building the platform? And did you just do cold outreach to them saying that, hey, this is the platform we're building. Would you mind answering some questions just so we can take it into the account and build a platform that would be great for you to use?
Yeah, so it was cold outreach. I mean, there's no other way
Mm,
to do it. And I think the benefit here is that the from a company perspective, a lot of the phone numbers are on the advertising sites, right? So they're public. Um, but yeah, there's no other way. I mean, there's no magical way of getting the feedback. I think it's just about being transparent and saying, look, I mean, this is not a booking request. This is something for a company that we're building, and this is our mission. Are you interested? Yes or no? And then also being mindful of everyone's time, right? So um,
yeah.
I think what's different in this market as opposed to any other tech product that you're building is that you have to be mindful of the time of the user or the provider in this perspective. So it's really important to offer to compensate for that time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect free user feedback, which is something that kind of is expected in other industries,
Mm-hmm.
So when you build, I don't know, when you build a food delivery app, you just go on the street and you ask 500 people, what do you think about food delivery? Like, what kind of
Yes.
food would you like to have delivered? Or you ask restaurants like, hey, we're building this app for you, what do you need in an app? And that's kind of the trade-off that is expected, that, you built the app for free, basically, and then the feedback is for free. But I understand that in this market, that's not the dynamic, and it also shouldn't be. So we always offer to compensate anyone for their input or feedback. And if they don't want to, or if they're happy to give it for free, obviously um, we appreciate that as a favor, as a gift.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And tell me more about the geographics of your platform. Are you now, I mean, that the domain I saw it's Swiss based, right?
Yeah.
.ch. Do you have now customers from all over Europe or US, or you have global audience? Because, for example, what is my first association when it comes to paid companionship is Japan, actually, because I've
Hmm.
seen a lot of documentaries that it's very popular there to hire really like a companion to accompany you or spend the evening, go to karaoke together or a club. And this industry is very developed there, I think, more
Mhm.
so than in any other countries. So I just wonder, how does your user base look like, and what is your ambition in terms of being present in which markets?
Yeah, so the domain is CH, because what we do is we just show, so because the company is based in Switzerland, we show
Mm-hmm.
all the services that can be legally rendered in Switzerland, which is all the services. And then providers need to specify where they are available. That's the
Mm-hmm.
reason why we ask for availability. Like, you can be 2 days in Switzerland, in Zurich, and then you can be 1 day in New York, and you can be 1 day in the UK, right? For example. So depending on where you are, there
Mm-hmm.
are different services legal on the paid companionship spectrum, right? So
I
in
see.
Zurich, you can offer all the services on the spectrum, including paid intimacy or paid sexual intimacy. In the UK, for example, it would be legal to offer paid sexual intimacy, but it's illegal to do intermediation. So the platform is
Mm.
illegal because uh,
Mm-hmm.
we would be promoting paid sexual intimacy. So in the UK, the only legal services that can be booked or on the platform are companionship and intimacy. So meaning holding hands, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
cuddling. And then in New York or in the US, it's again, even though the DA actually in New York said that they don't actively prosecute sex workers or self-determined sex workers anymore. So it's a very progressive stance. It's still illegal. So
Yeah.
in the US, you can also only legally render companionship services. But that's, I think, part of the journey, is to show governments as well that, you have a massive social problem of people, burning out from dating apps, or, have anxiety or productivity issues that you could actually address with paid companionship. And, everybody, like, it's not being used to the extent that it could be, because there is stigma, and because there is no safe booking platform. So I think that's just something that we want to discuss with governments as well, and show
Yeah.
policymakers what could be done if it's done in a safe way. And it can actually be done in a safe way. It's just a matter of starting somewhere, like this. That's why we're doing this. It's just one step. You have to start somewhere, and then obviously it's a long journey, but it's achievable.
That's super interesting. And I love that, yeah, you are not limited by only providing paid sexual intimacy, because then, yeah, it would be cutting you off from certain markets. But in this way, you can actually get there and potentially in the future implement all the services that
Yeah,
you
so
can
so
book through a
that's the
platform.
yeah, so that's the answer to the question. Is so we're available everywhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, what matters is what kind of services can be requested or rendered in the different geographies. So
I see.
that's what makes the difference.
Mm-hmm. And one of the final sections that I would like to cover with you is the future.
Mhm.
I've seen on your platform that there is already a category of a robot or a doll, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, big part of the conversation these days is AI and robots, or even AI, which is also like a hologram partner. How do you see it being, or like affecting paid companionship, or being an integral part of it? And what are some risks, besides the obvious one, that people might be discouraged to interact with real humans if this will develop to the point that it will become kind of integral part of our lives?
So I think our core value here is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't want people to chat with someone thinking they're chatting with someone else. Like what's happening on, for example, some of the online platforms that hire writers and or chatters, and people think they are chatting with one user, but they're actually chatting with somebody hired to answer chats, right? we think that would be against our core value. But at the same time, we want to enable providers also in the future to benefit from AI capabilities. And maybe not everyone, can afford or want to pay the price for chatting with a human being, which is fine, I think. And I guess our approach to that will be private market dynamics and let them play it out. What I mean by that is what we could imagine doing or incorporating is having, for example, providers on our platform add a feature, an AI feature, that they can activate an AI clone, basically, of themselves.
Mhm.
So it would still be transparent, and it would be very clear from a customer perspective whether you are chatting with the AI clone or the actual person. But there may be a price difference. So, for example, chatting, so the AI clone could still learn from the previous messages that were sent. So it would behave depending on how many messages were sent and how robust the training material is. It would still behave similar to the real person, but it would come at a lower price, presumably, because it's not the actual person answering the chat. So I think that would be our approach to that, is still tying it to a real human provider, but letting the clients choose whether or not they are willing to pay for a human interaction, making the human interaction more valuable, which we think it still should be. So it's fine. Maybe you just want somebody to answer your messages, and listen, and you don't really need a human being for that, and you want a fast response.
Yeah.
At the cheap price, and then you chat to an AI model that maybe costs, I don't know, 10 cents per message or whatever. And then after a week or two, you as a special occasion, you may want to chat to the real person, and that just has a higher price. So I think that's going to be our approach to that. And yeah, and along those lines, you can apply it to remote interaction, AI interaction. You can apply it to video interaction. You could also apply it eventually to, physical robot interaction. But
Yeah.
it just should be the ownership of the design should be with the provider. So if it's a copy of a real provider, that provider should benefit from the interaction that the AI or the robot has.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much, Arik. It was so insightful and I learned so many things. Please tell our listeners how they can find you online and follow your work and, of course, choice.
Sure, yeah. So the website is choice.ch, so www.choice.ch. There is also the registration process and our info hub with our weekly paid companionship industry insights. There's also the sign-up process for providers and customers. You can also just play around. There's 5 free messages for everyone who signs up to test the system. It's very easy to give us feedback on WhatsApp. So there's WhatsApp icons all over the website where you can just get in touch. And there's also the links to the socials, SaferChoice.ch on Instagram, and also SaferChoice.ch on X. And you can also find us on YouTube and TikTok.
Great, thank you. And I will also use this chance to remind our viewers and listeners to follow Nympho It's nympho.life on Instagram. And we just relaunched our website, so check it out as well. It's nympholife.com. Thank you so much, Arik. It's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to your success and success of choice and see how you progress.
Thank you so much for having me.